Emma enrolls her mother, Dorothy, who weighs 200 kilograms and is obese, in a weight loss dance class. However, when Emma checks on her mother's progress, she discovers that Dorothy has already quit the class and even taken back the tuition fee. The instructor mentions that Dorothy doesn't pay attention during class and even eats cake afterward, which makes Emma very upset. Meanwhile, Dorothy is at a tailor shop with her sister, Karen, trying on a cheapao that Emma had custom made for her. Since Dorothy hasn't lost weight and has actually gained some, the cheapao is very tight. When Emma arrives, Dorothy pretends it fits well and lies that she has lost 5 kilograms. However, she can't keep up the act for long and eventually has to sit down, which causes the cheapao to tear. At this point, Emma confronts her mother about her lies. She is genuinely worried about Dorothy's health, but Dorothy is very frugal and loves food, so sticking to an exercise routine and dieting are two things she simply can't manage. Usually, parents are the ones guiding their children, but now Emma finds herself lecturing her own mother. After Emma's father passed away, Dorothy raised her daughter by running a fried chicken shop, which led her to eat a lot of junk food and become obese. Meanwhile, Emma grew up to be a strong-willed woman. She was once the lead dancer of a Beijing dance troupe. After getting married, however, she decides to return to her hometown to work as a ballet teacher at a local children's dance school, where she also becomes a favorite teacher among parents. Emma and her husband, David, are deeply in love. Before they married, David promised not to pressure Emma about having children and assured her that she could keep dancing as long as she wanted. However, David's parents are high-ranking government officials who care a lot about family reputation. They want Emma to have children soon, and David's mother looks down on Dorothy, calling her the fried chicken seller and feeling displeased that the couple lives with Dorothy in the house she and her husband bought for them. That day, David brings his parents to the house. As they approach the gate, a neighbor hands David some money, saying it's for the next week's meals. Both he and his parents are confused and assume it might be payment for Emma's dance classes. But when they enter the house, they find it filled with children and parents, making it look like a daycare. It turns out Dorothy has started a daycare and meal service for neighborhood children while her daughter and son-in-law are at work. Today, she's caught red-handed by her son-in-law and his parents. David's mother is very displeased with the arrangement, especially since they bought the house, and Dorothy is using it for such a chaotic business. Soon, Emma arrives and is also upset with her mother. Realizing this is why Dorothy hasn't been attending her weight loss dance classes, Emma wants her mother to live a peaceful, healthy life, but Dorothy feels unworthy and wants to keep working and contributing. She's also uncomfortable with her daughter constantly trying to make her live in a specific way. The two argue and Dorothy storms off. Meanwhile, Karen has 2 children, Alice, a college senior, and her younger brother, Peter. Karen puts all her hopes on Peter, even though he's still in high school, believing he is gifted and destined for success. In contrast, she is indifferent to Alice's education, thinking academic results don't matter much for girls. She even treats the two differently, buying a new phone and laptop for Peter, while Alice had to buy second-hand items with her own part-time earnings. Under his mother's pressure, Peter relies on sedatives, and his grades are slipping. He's constantly stressed and anxious, and he even has recurring thoughts of suicide. Karen frequently reminds him of her sacrifices, saying she quit her teaching career to have and raise him, which only adds to Peter's feelings of guilt and pressure. Emma visits her 2 cousins and asks them to convince Dorothy to return home and attend the birthday party she has planned for her. Peter and Alice happily agree, and the 3 even joke about wishing they could swap mothers. The siblings visit Dorothy and open up about their feelings. Dorothy tells them that it was Karen's decision to quit her job, not Peter's fault. Even if Peter had to leave a test unfinished due to stress, affecting his college entrance scores, Dorothy reassures him that it's not the end of the world. Alice and Peter then plead with Dorothy as Emma requested, and she agrees to attend the party. The next day, Emma and David host a large birthday banquet for Dorothy. Emma even performs a dance as a gift for her mother, moving Dorothy and everyone else to tears. During the celebration, David's mother approaches Dorothy, urging her to convince Emma to have a child soon. She even promises to gift the couple a storefront if they do. However, Dorothy believes that the choice to have children should be up to Emma and David, so she declines to interfere. Meanwhile, Peter grows uncomfortable as he hears his mother, Karen, bragging about him at the party. He excuses himself to the restroom and takes a few sedatives to calm down. Karen, noticing something is off, follows him, making Peter feel even more pressured. That night, he decides to go stay with Dorothy, knowing that his exam results will be out soon and is worried about his mother's reaction when she learns his scores. As the party ends, everyone's leaving, but Dorothy stays behind, negotiating food expenses with the restaurant manager and packing up leftovers. This takes some time, so Dorothy's and Karen's families are the last to leave. The others convince Karen to let Peter stay with Dorothy for a few days, and she reluctantly agrees. It starts raining heavily as Emma drives her mother and cousin home. She and Peter chat happily while Dorothy dozes off in the back seat. A truck barrels toward them and crashes into the side of their car. Dorothy wakes up in a hospital, with David's mother at her side. She soon learns that Emma has been severely injured, and the doctors say her leg must be amputated. The hospital needs David's consent, but he is too devastated to make the decision and argues with the doctors. Hearing the commotion, Dorothy and David's mother rush over. As Dorothy gradually realizes the gravity of the situation, she is overwhelmed with sorrow but ultimately signs the papers to save Emma's life. Tragically, Peter did not survive the accident. Alice breaks down in grief, and Karen, unable to accept the loss, sinks into utter despair, struggling to process that her son is truly gone. When Karen sees Dorothy approaching, she blames her sister for the accident, accusing her of being greedy and insisting on packing all the leftovers, which led to the crash. She says that it was Dorothy who convinced her to let Peter stay with her, resulting in his death, and questions why Emma, who was driving, survived while her own son did not. Dorothy doesn't know what else to say except "I'm sorry." Alice then takes her mother home, where Peter's homeroom teacher calls to offer condolences. Even in her grief, Karen still asks about Peter's exam results. The teacher lies, saying his results were excellent, which makes Karen mourn her talented son even more. Emma's surgery is completed, and she begins to regain consciousness. David stays by her side at the hospital overnight. When his parents arrive, they find that Dorothy has gone missing. Feeling immense guilt, Dorothy wanders the streets in a daze, ignoring calls from her worried family. Since losing her son, Karen no longer has the will to do anything. Alice, needing to complete her graduation thesis, is torn between her work and concern for her mother, so she delays returning to her dorm to stay and care for her. When Alice visits Emma in the hospital, she finds her cousin deeply distressed over losing her legs. David, feeling helpless, asks Alice to find Dorothy. Eventually, Alice tracks her aunt down at a fried chicken restaurant, where Dorothy is eating excessively in an attempt to numb herself to the recent tragedies. After Alice's encouragement, Dorothy finally agrees to return to the hospital and face her daughter. Emma needs to go to the restroom, and Dorothy tries to carry her. She's big but too weak, and both of them end up falling, making Emma's pain even worse. A nurse rushes in, lifts Emma, and carries her to the restroom, leaving Dorothy feeling utterly helpless. Emma is devastated by her disability and refuses to eat. Dorothy is deeply moved seeing her son-in-law, David, by Emma's side every moment, caring for her with unwavering dedication. Dorothy brings food to encourage Emma to eat, but Emma sarcastically remarks that if Dorothy wants to eat so much, she can go ahead without her. Later that evening, Alice goes home and realizes her mother is missing. She searches for her and finds Karen standing alone by the river in a heavy rain. Seeing her mother lost in despair, Alice breaks down, saying that although her brother is gone, she's still here and needs her mother's love and support. Karen suddenly snaps out of her despair, realizing how neglectful she's been toward Alice. She embraces her daughter, and they cry together in the rain. The family of the truck driver comes to beg David and Alice for forgiveness and offer some compensation, but since they are not well off, they cannot give much. Despite still grieving her brother's death, Alice accepts this. Alice has to return to her campus, but she worries about her mother and fears that Karen might be thinking of harming herself at home. At the airport, Alice calls her mother, but Karen doesn't answer. At that moment, Karen stands by the river, looking down. Alice decides to go back home to check on her mother. When she arrives home and doesn't find Karen, Alice searches everywhere for her. Eventually, she discovers that Karen has returned home and is sleeping. Alice feels both frustrated and relieved to see her mother and decides to take her to Beijing with her so she can feel at ease. Alice moves Karen into her dorm room after asking permission from her roommates. They warmly welcome Karen. Understanding the situation and promising to keep this matter private from the dorm management, that night, Alice and Karen squeeze onto the bunk bed. The next day, Alice meets with her advisor, Ms. Yang. Ms. Yang sympathizes with Alice's situation and allows Karen to stay in the dorm for a week. Alice thanks her and promises to find alternative accommodation for her mother after that. During this week, Alice balances her studies with showing her mother around Beijing. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Emma suffers from phantom limb pain every night. The doctor advises Dorothy to talk with her daughter and recommends that Emma use a wheelchair and prosthetics to help her nerves adjust. The doctor then delivers some bad news: Emma will not be able to have children because her uterus has been severely damaged. Dorothy struggles to inform this news to Emma and David. Although David tries to remain composed, he feels horrified as the doctor changes Emma's bandages. She senses his discomfort and, in her pain, asks him to leave the room. In these moments, only Dorothy is there, ready to support her daughter. That night in the dorm, a friend calls Alice to ask for advice on how to relieve stomach bloating since she had helped him before, and this time his friend, Henry, is experiencing the same issue while they are out doing field research. Karen seems unhappy that her daughter is talking to a male friend at night, so Alice steps outside to take the call. Karen suspects her daughter is speaking with a boyfriend and interrogates her about it. Alice insists that it's just a friend, but Karen even sneaks a glance at her phone while she's sleeping. Meanwhile, Dorothy brings food for her daughter and also some for the nurses at the hospital, which brings joy to everyone. However, Emma only feels more annoyed with her mother. She snaps at Dorothy and makes sarcastic remarks, but Dorothy understands that Emma is in a lot of pain and that's why she is acting this way. David visits Emma and gently reminds her to eat properly, but Emma worries that if she gains weight, it will be harder for him to lift her. David reassures her, tells her that he bought an electric wheelchair so she can go outside more easily. Just then, Dorothy enters the room cheerfully with the new wheelchair, hoping to lift Emma's spirits. However, Emma becomes upset, refusing to go outside out of fear that people will mock her condition. David tries to lift Emma into the wheelchair anyway, but she pushes him away and snaps at him, leading him to leave in frustration. Dorothy attempts to console her daughter, only to be blamed for the accident and Emma's disability. In a moment of anger, Emma pours the soup Dorothy made over the wheelchair controls. Feeling deep guilt, Dorothy promises Emma that she will lose 50 kilograms within 3 months to inspire her daughter to start fresh. Emma scoffs, dismissing it as another empty promise from her mother. Yet, the next day, Dorothy begins her intense weight loss journey, jogging in the park until she can't continue each day. She tries strange methods, even wearing a raincoat while running to sweat more and drinking only water with hot sauce to suppress her appetite. Back at the dorm, Karen, meanwhile, cleans and cooks daily for Alice and her roommates, making everyone grateful and willing to help cover for her extended stay with the dorm manager. As the days pass, Dorothy continues visiting Emma at the hospital every night after her workouts. Emma starts noticing the toll her mother's effort is taking and slowly begins to feel a sense of guilt, realizing how much Dorothy is pushing herself to give Emma hope. Alice's roommate, Hannah, has a crush on Henry, the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, and agrees to write an article for him. However, unsure of what to write, she asks Alice for help. Alice agrees, and they head to the library together. Meanwhile, Henry sees Alice on campus and is instantly impressed by her, although he keeps his interest to himself. At home, David arranges for contractors to modify the house to make it accessible for Emma. He also stores away Emma's dance photos, hoping she won't feel as sad about her lost career when she returns. Emma, touched by her mother's commitment to losing weight, decides to make an effort too. She attempts to sit up in her wheelchair, but she falls to the floor. The noise wakes Dorothy, who quickly helps her daughter back to bed and encourages her to stay strong. When Hannah submits her article draft to Henry, he is very pleased. She then shares that Alice helped her complete it and tells him about Alice's family situation, which has led her mother to stay in the dorm temporarily. Later, when the dorm manager arrives to conduct inspections for unauthorized high-power appliances and unreported guests, Henry, as vice president of the student union, is informed about it. Realizing that Alice's mother may be discovered, he quickly comes up with an excuse and runs off, hoping to find a way to help them. Upon hearing about the inspection, Alice and her mother Karen try to hide in the communal bathroom, only to find it locked. With no other option, Alice has Karen hide in the bathroom inside their dorm room. When the inspection team arrives, they initially find nothing suspicious. However, Karen, thinking they left, steps out, only to be seen by the inspectors who are still in the room. Just then, Henry rushes in, having quickly obtained a half-month extension for Karen's stay from Alice's department head, who he knows personally. His intervention saves Alice from punishment, and both she and Karen feel grateful for his help. Karen assumes Henry is helping them to impress Hannah. she also envies his good family background and wishes Alice could find a boyfriend like that. She begins pressuring Alice to consider dating someone from Beijing, seeing it as a way for her daughter to stay in the city. Alice suggests that Karen should return home, but Karen refuses, wanting to stay to help her daughter find a job and a boyfriend before graduation. With Peter gone, Karen is now transferring all her hopes and expectations onto Alice. Meanwhile, Dorothy continues her intense weight loss journey. She wraps her arms and legs in plastic wrap and only drinks clam juice. Exhausted, she collapses in the street from low blood sugar. Thankfully, people helps her regain consciousness, though she finds herself nibbling on sweets upon waking, which worries her about her commitment to losing weight. People advise her to train with a professional at a gym for better results. At the gym, Brandon, a colleague of Emma's at dancing school, now works as a personal trainer after losing his dance teaching job due to parent complaints. He struggles financially, with his landlord constantly calling for rent, so he tries to charge extra fees to his clients. However, the client feels scammed by the added fees and leaves right away. Dorothy goes back to the gym, begging the manager to help her lose 50 kilos in 3 months. The manager refuses, saying it's impossible with her current health. Brandon overhears and sees a chance to make money. Pretending to call someone, he loudly brags about being an extreme weight loss trainer with fast results. Dorothy believes him and approaches him to talk. Brandon demands 30,000 yuan as a training fee and promises he can help her lose the weight in 5 months. Desperate, Dorothy agrees. Meanwhile, Alice buys a cake to thank Henry for his help with the dorm inspection. Henry is happy and invites her for coffee, where he suggests she write for the school magazine. He tells her it could be even better than an internship since it connects her with more important people. Alice sees the benefits and decides to join the magazine. Back at the dorm, though, Alice's roommates, Hannah and Nicole, start feeling uncomfortable with Karen staying there. Karen is always cleaning, cooking, and tidying, and though she means well, it's starting to feel intrusive. Brandon sets up an intense training program for Dorothy, and she manages to lose 3 kilograms in a week. Dorothy still feels it's too slow, but Brandon reassures her to stay patient. Although exhausted, she is determined to keep going, because she doesn't want the money she spent to go to waste. Meanwhile, Karen complains to Alice that her roommates are starting to act coldly toward her. However, when Alice finds out that her mother has been going through Hannah's belongings, she also feels it might be better for Karen to move out. Principal Zheng visits Emma, bringing gifts and some belongings from her locker to David. He also offers a sum of money and requests access to Emma's dance video account to continue promoting the school. However, David declines, stating that these videos represent Emma's hard work and memories, which she has the right to keep. Emma, once the face of the school, now has her images taken down. David's mother insists on finding ways to remove the scar on Emma's face, but David warns her against mentioning it, as it only upsets Emma. He tearfully confides that Emma has become very sensitive. If he says anything that bothers her, she withdraws entirely and refuses to eat or speak. When Dorothy arrives at the hospital, she overhears this from a nurse and decides to take Emma outside for some sunshine, excitedly sharing her weight loss journey. While her mother steps away, Emma sneaks a look at her mother's phone and finds the contract with Brandon regarding the weight loss program. She recalls Brandon as an arrogant person who looked down on others. In the dorm, Alice and her friends chat about career and men, and Karen intervenes, accusing them of neglecting their parents. This makes everyone uncomfortable, as Karen fails to recognize that each family has its own dynamics and values. When Alice tries to calm her mother down, it escalates into a heated argument, with Karen storming out, blaming Alice. At the gym, the manager sees Dorothy's dedication and mentions that Brandon isn't a certified trainer there. Unbothered, Dorothy defends Brandon, saying his training has been effective. Brandon overhears that and feels touched. He begins opening up to her, asking why she is so committed to losing weight quickly. Dorothy shares her story about her daughter, explaining she hopes to inspire her daughter and be physically fit to care for her. Brandon realizes that her daughter is Emma, his former colleague. Meanwhile, Karen, feeling distraught, sits by a lake and chats with the janitor, again boasting about her children. Alice eventually finds her. Karen, now calmer, apologizes to her daughter. They agree it's time to move out of the dorm. However, they struggle with the high costs and poor conditions of rental places. Henry, calling Alice about an article, learns of her difficulty finding housing. He quickly locates a place for them to rent and even drives a vehicle to help with the move. Karen invites him to stay for dinner to express gratitude, but he politely declines. She is convinced Henry has feelings for Alice, while Alice dismisses this, thinking he's just doing his job as a helpful vice president of the student union. Dorothy tries to take Emma to the park, but Emma feels embarrassed when a child looks at her with fear. She puts on a mask and insists on returning to the hospital. Meanwhile, Brandon becomes supportive of Dorothy, buying her a fitness watch and quality running shoes, which motivate her even more. However, Emma believes that Brandon is scamming her mother, so she contacts Principal Zhang to inform him that she will sue Brandon for fraud.